So another British Grand Prix in the bag, and Cardiff delivering once again. And for the second time in 3 years, we've got a British winner at the top of the podium, and that man once again is Dan Bewley, still remaining unbeaten in a Grand Prix final and taking maximum points as well, also winning the sprint race. Kelvin Tatum is with us, and Kelvin, great results. One that you probably didn't see coming, actually, in some respects, because looking back, of course, at the meeting, there's that big confusion about who'd actually made the final stages of the meeting. At one point, Dan Bewley was the rider that might well have been out, finished in, I think, 8th place in the qualifying and got in there and took the lot in the end.
Yeah, that was a wonderful result and a fabulous night of Speedway all round. It reminded me of the earlier days in Cardiff with the enthusiasm and excitement in the stadium. Crowds aren't quite what they were, but there's no doubt the atmosphere in there was fantastic. Yeah, the whole deal about when we finished the 20 heats and this controversy and confusion over 4 riders on 9 points, I think at stage on our second monitor, all 4 of them at one point were out. All 4. Martin Zmarzlik initially, then it was Lambert, then it was Bewley, then obviously it was Janowski in the end. Whether that was the right decision or not, I'm not entirely sure. They actually reverted to the world rankings, and as Janowski is not in the series, inevitably he was the one that missed out. To the relief, of course, to the 2 British boys, because they were on a roller coaster of emotions. You know, there was a picture of Robert Lambert sitting quite disconsolately in his pit box, clearly believing that he wasn't going to take any further part in the meeting. In actual fact, I overheard Dan Bewley chatting to Abby last night saying, he thought it was over and he was going to put his bike up and pop out and have a beer. So, you know, it was quite staggering how that happened, and rare, fortunately, but it was broadcasting on the meeting. We were kind of left in no man's land for a while there. So, but yeah, they got over that fabulously well and managed to get their way through to the final. Historic result, and the place went completely nuts. I had to take my headset off as they went across the line because it was so noisy. Really was. My ears were ringing for 2 days. But no, it was fabulous to be back at Cardiff, because the first 2 after COVID, there's been a sense of anticlimax to a degree, but this one I think has put the record straight, and I think it's put Cardiff right back on the map. So yeah, it had a bit of everything. It really did. It was a great night.
And I think some great racing as well. It wasn't all from the gate. There was some passes, not necessarily for first place, but some of the throwing moves. I mean, that one with Bewley diving up the inside, I think, in his first heat was just a sublime move. And, there were some great moments in the fixture as well. So for anybody I know there's quite a lot of people that had gone to Cardiff for the first time, having been Speedway fans for a long time, and they've given it the benefit of the doubt. And I think they've been rewarded. Some great racing. The track, Ollie Olsen and his guys have seem to have perfected it now after that disaster in 2022. We had Phil Morris on the British Speedway podcast, last week, saying obviously a lot of work has gone in since then to try and avoid that situation and to give a great racetrack. And now the 2 temporary tracks in Warsaw and Cardiff have delivered some spectacular racing this season.
They have. It was unfortunate in 2022 because of the way the material was stored. It wasn't necessarily Ollie Olsen's issue. There was something happened where it had been put on gravel, and when they picked the material up, it actually had loads of stones, and I think the material had degraded and it just didn't bind together, and as a consequence the meeting was very difficult indeed. You're right, the meeting and the surface in particular behaved beautifully on Saturday night. There were no restarts, there were no crashes. In actual fact, we were rattling through the races. If we hadn't had that controversy and all sorts of confusion, the delay, I think we might have been done by 7:30. It really was quite staggering how quickly the meeting ran through. That's how smoothly it was. You're right, yeah, the racing was of a high standard. I think it enabled riders to be confident, to have a real good go. There was some chaos out there at times. There were some fabulous passes. And all round, I think, it'd be hard to criticise it. I'm sure you could nitpick a little bit here and there, but for a temporary track, I think everybody went away pretty satisfied. And of course, you know, in Britain with a 1-2, that obviously was the icing on the cake. And I think it was timely for Dan because, you know, he hasn't had a great run in the Grand Prix. He's sort of been sort of a nearly man, sort of like starting Grand Prix. In truth, the qualifiers, he started well and did fade away. You know, it looked like he was going to get a double-figure score quite comfortably, and that an event actually only ended up on 9 points. So, and Robert Lambert likewise. But it just showed you the nature of the evening because you top scored on 11, you could miss out on 9, just 2 points between them. So that is rare, actually, for a top 8 in a Grand Prix. I can't remember it happening on many occasions, but yeah, you know, it was fantastic. And as I say, Mr. Bewley is a man who seems to have ice running through his veins when he gets to those stages, doesn't he? He delivers. He doesn't miss out. You know, he was very late coming into the start position, into his gate 1 position. I mean, literally only had a couple of seconds left when he rolled in. But then he took a deep breath and flew away from the tape. So fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
So yeah, a British 1-2, and you say with Dan Bewley having ice in his veins and never really failing in a final in the Grand Prix, including the day before in the sprint race as well, which also delivered some drama in itself. But again, Dan Bewley winning there and performing there again when the pressure's on and getting another 4 points on the board. So 24 points for him in one weekend has certainly made a difference to his campaign now. Significant
move by him, one that was required because he was languishing down in, I think it was equal 9th or 10th with Wozniak. So, yeah, handy points for him. He can get on a roll now. You just sense the confidence should be there. And even there's a storyline with Dan because he came out in the first session on the Friday afternoon for qualifying and he was 15th. He was slow. He wasn't quickest in his group. He found half a second to go to the top and beat everybody by a country mile on the qualifying times, and then got the inside gate, blew him away again. So, you know, he is a remarkable character like that. He doesn't panic. He is quite a sort of like composed, relaxed sort of character. He doesn't appear to suffer with nerves. And so, yeah, it was a dream weekend for him in that regard. And all credit to him, as I say. 2 sprint race wins. He first final of the year, wins his home Grand Prix for the second time. It was stuff that dreams are made of. That will live long in the memory, I'm sure it will.
When you think about how long we've waited for a British winner as well, but obviously we had Bomber do it in 2007, and we waited all that time until 2022 for Dan Bewley to finally crack that nugget, and now he's gone and done it again. It sort of feels like a bit more expected that he's done it this time. It doesn't feel like as big a thing. Obviously, the first one was massive, but it is still a huge achievement to go there. And there's not many riders that have won multiple British Grand Prix. Obviously, Greg Hancock's done it. I think Jason Crump's done it. But, you know, he's now in a sort of an elite category of rider that's been there and done it more than once.
He is indeed. Riders like Tony Ricardson have done it a couple of times. Yeah. You know, so, you know, there's no doubt that he is moving. His CV is improving. You look at his CV this year. He's won the British Championship for the 3rd time. He won the Speedway of Nations, you know, with Robert just a few short weeks ago, and now he's won Cardiff for the 2nd time. So, yeah, he just needs to find a bit more consistency. And if he can manage to do that, then he could be a genuine World Championship contender. Right now, I would think his target is to make the top 6 and to make sure that he's a Grand Prix rider, to take any question mark out of the equation that he will be back in 2025. I think if he didn't make it, there's no doubt that he should get a wild card. But I think he's the sort of character that would rather not rely on that. But yeah, you know, Dan Bewley is somebody that I think if he can just add that consistency that you see from a Bartosz Zmarzlik character and riders in the past that are able to, when things aren't quite right, those are the nights when you still need to get your 12 or your 14 points, not coming away with a 5 or a 6. That's the difference between winning a campaign and being a very good runner in it. So that's the next step for him. But second half of the season, we'll see how he gets on. He's got 2 venues where he's won. Next week, of course, he's going to Wrocław, where he has won before, and he knows the place like the back of his hand. But just quickly back before we finish on Dan, the weight of expectation as a previous winner coming to Cardiff, I can assure you, is huge. Because as you rightly point out, we're kind of expecting it now, aren't we? You know, he's a multiple Grand Prix winner. He's done it once before. He's won other Grand Prix. He won in Melilla last year. He's won 4 now. And you sort of people, you know, it's quite fickle out there. You go from the euphoria of the debut final, you've won it, and then people just think, well, of course he's going to win, you know, because he's a top-class rider and he's done it before, so why can't he do it again? So it's not quite as straightforward as that, but he did. I think that adds to the significance of his victory.
Well, we should also shine a light on Robert Lambert, of course, who conversely is still waiting for his first Grand Prix win, but came very close, but not close enough at Cardiff. Second place, though, second on the step at the Principality Stadium is no small achievement. But crucially overall, though, that fires Robert Lambert at this point in time into second in the world right now. Still a bit of a gap between himself and Bartosz Zmarzlik, 21 points, but you know he's there or thereabouts and in with a chance of a medal overall at the end of the season.
Yeah, Robert is mastering the art of being consistent. He just had a blip in Gorzów, which was a shame, but he bounced back with a second place on Saturday in Cardiff and moves up to, because Jack Holder missed out. Obviously, he's leapt up the rankings and 90 World Championship points with 100 still available. So, you know, he is looking good for a medal, you know, and I'm sure he will be, you know, believing that he can maybe get gold. You know, we just don't know. But, yeah, I think Robert Lambert's performance was very, very strong. I think he showed tremendous commitment to the cause, and it was good for him to come back after a poor Grand Prix in Gorzów and ride so well. There is a but for me. There is a slight question mark. He had the first choice of gates in the final. He chose to go out of gate number 2 where he'd won a couple of races from. But maybe he may reflect on that. Maybe he should have taken the inside gate. And that may have given him the opportunity to win his first Grand Prix. When you get to those final stages, very easy on the outside looking in. I understand that. But maybe some advice there to say, look, I know you've won a couple of races from there, but if you give Bewley the inside gate, he only has to be level with you. If you are on gate 2, you have to make a smashing start and hope the guy on the inside doesn't get his way as well. You've got some uncertainties there. And it just didn't quite fall for him. It can't be far away, Ian. You keep knocking on the door like that. Sooner or later, you're gonna walk through it. So he looked pleased, didn't he? He looked genuinely pleased, and I don't think he has too much regret about it. But possibly since then, over the few days since then, he may have reflected on that. But still, nonetheless, another terrific performance from him.
Yeah, he managed to get something out of Gate 2, didn't he? Where I think up until that point, Gate 2 was one of the worst because there was a lot of success coming off Gate 4 as well for a few of the riders, certainly early in the meeting. But maybe he just felt that things were moving in that direction. But obviously, he made a great start, didn't he?
I can understand the train of thought entirely. You know, and he said in the interview afterwards he felt confident, and that's good news. Back yourself. Martin Vashlik won from Gate 3 last year. You know, we weren't expecting that. So it can be done, and it is done, and particularly at the later stages there. Sometimes, you know, the percentage of wins from gates can actually go completely out of the window because it's late in the night, gates have worn, you know, advantages have sort of, it all generally tends to level itself out. But, you know, if you're going to look at that with the first choice, possibly he may do things slightly differently next time. But still another great showing, and for Robert Lambert to be second in the world right now, I think he'll be chuffed to bits with that. He rides Wrocław very well, he's very comfortable in Poland, so he'll be looking to that. Torun, of course, is his home track, which is the final round in Poland in the Ekstraliga. So I would think he's very excited about the possibility of a medal in 24.
Perhaps the other story, though, was Bartosz Zmarzlik, who failed to qualify for the semi-finals. Obviously, there was the one where he was banned last year in Vojens, but aside that, he was 51 semi-finals on the bounce, and so the first time he's not qualified. First time he's missed a Cardiff final while he's been riding as well, I believe. So quite a big day really for Bartosz Zmarzlik to miss the cut there. As you say, it was a very competitive Grand Prix at the top end of the table, and it was easy for riders to just miss out, and he really just couldn't quite get to grips with things, and just lacking the points overall through the course of the meeting.
Yeah, he didn't look really comfortable at all, and there's no question there is some sort of uncertainty. I think there's been, for such a long period of time, there's been this clarity, and the decision-making process has been absolutely spot on, and even when he hasn't quite been at his very best, he's still been able to ground out results. And as you pointed out, that consistency of 51 semi-finals is just staggering. I mean, it really is. That's how good that is. I think he's been lacking for speed a little bit all season, and I think he's been working extremely hard to keep producing the results he has been. And fair play to him, he's made all the finals. So, and he's got a 27-point lead in the championship, but it's not through the wonderful displays. It's been through these really gritty performances. And I think circumstances, maybe getting beat up a little bit in the Extraliga, running third in the national championship. As you rightly said earlier on, Speedway of Nations result didn't go as well, although he did have a heavy fall there. You could kind of excuse it. He had a real good bang on his head when he came off. Might not have been at his best, but nonetheless, it wasn't a great result for Poland there. And he certainly wasn't dominant, far from it. He's tried a different engine, so not a different engine, he's tried a different engine tuner very recently. That didn't work on Saturday night because he only used it once. And then reverted back to the previous ones. But he just never really got going. He won a race and he looked really good, but then subsequently couldn't back it up. Is it a blip? Is it a downturn in performance because his mind's a bit scrambled? I think there's a bit of that. There is a bit of that. The psychology in sport, and particularly in Speedway with such only 60 seconds to prove yourself, plays a huge role. Huge role. It'll be very interesting to see what he does in the next 4 rounds. He still had a reprieve with Jack Holder missing out. If Jack Holder had won, it would only be 14-point lead. That gives a slightly different complexion. But Jack didn't quite manage to do that. So with Dan winning, it wasn't really a disaster because he still got more than a Grand Prix advantage over everybody else. But I think everybody will be watching with interest to see how Bartosz reacts now and his level of performance going forward, because I think Lublin, his club, has been involved in some of the decision-making process behind the scenes regarding engine tuners. And when you work with somebody for a long time, he's been with Kowalski for 7 years, to suddenly then have a different relationship, a different conversation with somebody, it didn't work straight away. He used it in practice in one run, he wasn't that fast on it. He used it in Heat 1. Possibly he feels that because he had such an advantage, Ian, with a 27-point lead, he had the luxury of being able to experiment a bit. But it didn't work. And it might be something that's put on the back burner for a little while. But no, nonetheless, it is the door slightly ajar. Are we seeing a slight decline here and a lack of form that will enable riders like Robert Lambert, like Mikkel Mikkelsen, like these other guys that are queuing up, because it's all very tight behind him, really tight. Are we going to see, that lead whittled away? I still fancy him, but it is a talking point for sure.
Yeah, well, as you say, that top 5 really what's separated by 3 points behind him. Obviously, he's got that 21-point gap, but you've got second place Robert Lambert 90 points, Zmarzlik on 111, Robert Lambert 90, Lindgren on 88 in third, Jack Holder 1 point behind at 87, Mikkel Mikkelsen also on 87 in fifth, and then you've got a bit of a drop down to Martin Vašilik and Dan Bewley on 75 and 73. So that top 5, though, are certainly all in the running for medal places. The next round, Wrocław, of course, which is Dan Bewley's home track, but for Zmarzlik, he'll fancy his chances. He's going to have that partisan crowd, of course. He's going to be, it is another home Grand Prix there. So that's an opportunity for him to lay a marker down. He wins there, and you're probably thinking, well, we're all done apart from the parade in this. But if he has another bad one and concedes another 6 or 7 points like he did in Cardiff, then all of a sudden Riga, Voyens and Torun are squeaky bum time there.
Yeah, and we saw it last year when he was DQ'd in Voyens. Of course, it went down to 6 points with Freddie coming through in second place. And I think it pretty much went down to the last race, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah.
I think if results had gone right in the last race, there may well have been a run-off for the World Championship. And that would have been extraordinary. But Bartosz Zmarzlik is made of stern stuff. He is a very strong character. He won't want to let it slip. Not every season do you get it all your own way. Not every season does everything go smoothly. For whatever reason it is, he hasn't quite had this stunning, speed, sort of like breathtaking performances that we've become accustomed to. I think we've seen one, Melilla. Melilla was extraordinary. He rode his socks off there and just came from everywhere. He was just not going to be stopped that night. But he hasn't reproduced that sort of performance on a regular basis this year, although he's still made every final until Saturday night. So I think they need to be cautious and calm to not overthink it and panic stations. But as you rightly say, we haven't seen much of this in the last 4 or 5 years. Even when Laguta won in 21, I mean, that was extraordinary speedway between the two. It wasn't because Bartosz Zmarzlik lost form. He just got beat by the better man that year. It was just fantastic speedway. This is the first time, I think, that there's been a period of time, and with a change of engine tuner at a strange time of a season, lack of form in the league, in his national championship. Who knows? How long will it go on for? We'll see.
Yeah. Still certainly possible for all those behind him to steal it off him, but it will be a tough task, you fancy. Just a couple of final things on Cardiff. Performance of Tom Brennan. He got himself 4 points. Could have been one more. I spilt beer all over myself as a result. But it was, great race there. Just pipped by Mikkelsen, but that was one of the high points of the Grand Prix as well for the British fans, of course.
Yes, absolutely. And Tom Brennan didn't disgrace himself at all. He can be proud of what he did on the biggest stage at home. He would have been nervous. He said he was excited, but I'm sure there was plenty of nerves involved in it as well. But it was a shame that he wasn't able to quite hang on to win a race in Cardiff. I'm sure he will do because there's a bright future for Tom Brennan. But no, I think he can go away having learnt an awful lot. I think what will be uppermost in his mind as he leaves the stadium, or he left the stadium rather, is the fact that, it's all very well being able to steal a win off a Jack Holder or Dan Bewley or a Freddie Lindgren when you're in the league, but they're a different animal when they're racing for the ultimate prize. All of a sudden, them fellas find another 10, 15%. So I know personally when I was starting to ride in world finals, and you might be able to beat a Hans Nielsen or you beat an Eric Gunnarsson, and all of a sudden you come to a world championship around, and like they're going down one straight and you're going down the other, and you're sort of scratching your head a bit, going, "What's going on here?" But those fellas just are able to, and that's something you have to be able to add to your armoury as you become more experienced. You need to be able to ride your league racing, produce good, solid results, but then when you go to a Grand Prix, you need to have that where all of a sudden that steely determination, you have to raise your game. So part of the learning process, and I'm sure he experienced that on Saturday night. But yeah, it's young Tom, I like him. He speaks well. He's well turned out, and I'd like to think that he will have a big future. And who knows? And maybe next year or two, maybe he'll be a Grand Prix rider.
Well, he's certainly aiming at it. That's what he's aiming at, and setting his stall out, and certainly giving a good account of himself on that first full performance there as a wild card in the British Grand Prix. And he's come close to winning the British title, of course, as well, which is how he found himself in that position. So, he's had a good season. We are back in Cardiff in 2025, which is the other thing. There was always that question mark, is it or isn't it? But certainly Phil Morris saying last week that he can see the Grand Prix staying there as long as people support it. And it certainly seemed to be a good atmosphere, I think, around Cardiff, in the stadium, outside the stadium, in the fan zone. It seemed like it was, well attended and people sort of positive about it as well. But we're heading back there in 2025.
Yeah, similar time of year, I believe. I don't actually have the date to hand. I'm not sure if it's even been announced yet.
No, they haven't announced it yet.
No, I think it's going to be about the same time of year. But delighted that we're going back. The alternatives, people talk about Bellevue, fabulous track, of course it is, goes without saying, but you can't get enough people in there. I know the attendance isn't quite what it used to be at Cardiff. It's improving, and it was very enthusiastic there on Saturday, and you're right to say that the atmosphere around the place was upbeat, no question about it. It felt like the Cardiff of old. People really excited, genuine enthusiasm for the event. There has been a little bit of moaning and groaning and people possibly staying away as a consequence. But I tell you what, Saturday night will do Cardiff's reputation no harm at all. I think it really puts it right back on the map, and I fully expect people to go back in their droves next year. But where else could you go? Even if we're getting 25, 30,000, where can we go? Cardiff is, when the tracks are like that, Cardiff is the ideal venue. That place generates atmosphere. I think anywhere we go in the UK would be, unfortunately, with all respect to all the other venues, I think it would be a backward step. I really do. I think it's a major city. It's a fabulous stadium. It has history now. And we can get enough people in there.
And crucially, it has a roof, which means that you can be reasonably confident it's not going to get rained off, whatever else might happen. So that is its biggest bonus, I think, isn't it? And it is a cavernous stadium, but that is a great thing to have.
Oh, crikey, yeah. And when you think about the financial implications of taking on a project like that every year, it's not cheap. So, the fact that you've got the roof closed and you're 100% guaranteed to be on, because actually, as I walked away from the stadium on Saturday evening, it was just beginning to drizzle. And I just thought, it's the middle of August, but we're in Wales. So it's a microclimate down there, and you're absolutely correct. And if you had a Grand Prix at Bellevue or anywhere else without a roof, early season, for example, I mean, the likelihood of rain coming in, you know what the weather was like at the beginning of this year. It never stopped raining. It rained every night. So, no, I'd like to see it continue. And I think performances and results like Saturday night can only do it the world of good, So, yeah, let's hope that we can back it up with another smashing year next year.
So, from the Grand Prix in Cardiff, your next stop was Ipswich, one of life's great journeys, traversing the nation there from one side to the other pretty much. Just overall, really, where we're at with the British Speedway Row Motor Oil Premiership now, obviously the playoff places are done, really. I think Bellevue just need to ride a meeting, don't they, which they're going to do home and away. Certainly the second leg is going to be on Eurosport on Monday night with Sheffield, because they're riding Sheffield at lunchtime, and then it's back to Alderton on the evening. So it's a double header, classic bank holiday double header. But Sheffield leading the way, Leicester in second place, Ipswich in third at this moment in time. So whilst we know the four teams, we don't know who's going to be riding each other yet in the playoffs, because that is going to go down to first versus fourth and second versus third, and those positions are still fairly fluid.
Yeah, I got that wrong the other night. I actually said that they had choice, the team that comes top. That isn't the case, you're right. But actually, what actually happens at the end of the day will probably come down to stadium availability.
Possibly, yeah.
It will have a bearing on what way round that goes. Top four, by and large, are done. Pretty much the top four that the majority of people have expected. You feel for Birmingham, Oxford and Kings Lynn. Oxford, of course, were hanging around in fourth place for a long time, but Leicester finally have clicked in the last month and a half, and they've all of a sudden got going, and they're a major threat. Everybody's talking about Leicester now, and they're going good at the right time. They don't have injury problems. You know, they don't have a scenario where, you know, they've got too many other interruptions. You know, those guys are fundamentally, you know, league racers in that team. Max Frick, of course, is in the GP, but, you know, the majority of that team, I think a catalyst for it as well has been, Frick's been going well, but Luke Becker's got going. Luke Becker was out of form at the beginning of the season, but Becker's performances recently have been fabulous. And I think, you know, Masters and Douglas and Lawson, it's a solid team. We spoke about it in an early podcast this year, didn't we? And I thought that was quite a good league team. And they didn't get off to the start I was expecting, so they are on a roll now. And it wouldn't surprise me if they finish top. It wouldn't surprise me. Sheffield may have a say about it, of course they may, but they are in a rich vein of form. And, you know, look, I feel desperate for Ipswich, I really do. You know, the way it's worked out for them, that's tough. That's really tough because their season, you know, they've got another home match on Thursday. That'll be 3 home meetings in a week. And all of a sudden, if they were to lose again on Thursday, I mean, that's a mood hoover. You know, they had so much enthusiasm and excitement. You've got Jason Doyle, you've got Emil Saifutinov, you've got Adam Ellis, Danny King. Very attractive team. You build your team around them two. You lose both of them. And now they're not allowed to sign anybody. You know, and they're struggling for guests for the playoffs because riders like Maciej Janowski and Freddie Lingland that won't be in the playoffs, they won't be released by their Polish clubs, so they are not available. So it really does narrow the choice for riders at the very vital moments of the season. And that's where I think there should be special dispensation. It really should be, because that sort of, it almost rules them out. Unless they're very fortunate. They did very well to cope without Doyle. Very well. But they relied heavily on Saifutinov. And unfortunately, they've now lost him. So that's the way it is. But I don't feel it's quite right. But it is a tough business. And they're going to have to cope as well as they can do. But it's all bubbling up quite nicely. I think the playoffs I'd like to think the playoffs will be very hotly contested.
Well, yeah, and Sheffield and Ipswich, of course, facing each other on Monday night just gone, which was the fixture you were at. And the story there, of course, was Sheffield maybe not getting off to the best start, but then coming charging back into it once again and sort of really settling things in the top 2, where Leicester sort of storming into the party as well with their win on Monday night. But it's coming down to those teams again, and it's Sheffield and Leicester in the next few weeks are going to face each other a few times because they've got this league meeting, and then they've of course it was Sheffield and Leicester where Emil got himself injured in the first leg. The two of them are going to be contesting the Knockout Cup final as well in the next couple of weeks. So they are two sides that are familiar with each other, and then they could end up against each other at some point in the playoffs as well.
Yeah, they'll be familiar with one another, won't they? That's for sure. They might be bored of each other by the end of it, but because they're going to be going head to head, there won't be too many. Be too many secrets as regards the teams. As I say, it's all about momentum at this time of year, you know. And Leicester are looking ominous because they've got it. All the teams, you know, Sheffield included, have injury problems. You know, rider replacement for Ty Woofenden. I don't think you'll see Ty Woofenden back this year in England. Obviously, young Dan Gilks last night, he's got an eye infection and he was out. But in truth, they coped very admirably and they've got a lot of strength and depth, that team. I don't know quite which way it was going to go this year. But as I say, I think Monday night was a difficult night after Cardiff. Track wasn't great at the beginning of the meeting. Ipswich got off to a good start. It looked like they were going to cope admirably with the guests and the lineup they had, but all of a sudden the track improved and Sheffield made starts for fun and came through in flying colours. So, yeah, not too much longer to wait now, Ian, really, because, you know, in the next week or two we're going to know exactly who's going to be racing who. We know the teams, of course, but right now, Richie Hawkins saying last night that, you know, they've got to forget about being top. They've just got to now regroup and try and put as good a sides together as they possibly can for the Knockout Cup and, of course, the semi-finals of the playoffs.
And looking at the Premiership table overall, obviously Sheffield top right now, Leicester second, Ipswich third, Bellevue fourth, Oxford 5th, Kings Lynn 6th, Birmingham 7th. Going back to the start of the season when you were predicting the league, you're probably not far out there, Kelv. We said it'd come down probably between Oxford and Leicester for who goes through. Called that one. We haven't obviously got the final order yet, but you're looking like you were fairly on the money there, Kelv. It's almost like you know what you're on about.
Yeah, well, you've got to get lucky once in 30 years. I've been trying to roll the dice for a while. I'm going to try and collect on it, but I don't know if I'm going to get the exact order right, Ian. I think that's a bit of a tall order, that one. But hey, but I did predict that Kings Lynn, Birmingham and Oxford would miss out. It's never easy, and it's quite tough to actually, at the beginning of the season, to suggest that those teams wouldn't have a great campaign. You know, fans will hate you for it, but inevitably, 3 teams do miss out. Oxford looked encouraging for a while, but they just have not quite had the consistency. Kings Lynn, again, I mean, losing Michalak and injury problems left, right and centre, that just hasn't been their campaign. And they had a good-looking team, actually, but it just doesn't seem to click up there. And Birmingham I just felt that team was sort of thrown together at the last minute. You know, when Václav Milik wasn't really good. Pavlicki has been injured a lot. Great signing for Lindgren, but Lindgren can't do it on his own. Just can't do it on his own. Tom Brennan has ridden well for him, but they just haven't been strong enough. So it's a shame. But yeah, let's hope that they're around next year and they can come back.
And just finally, a word for Leicester, because they finally qualified for the playoffs. They've never done it before. And them coming back up to the top level of Speedway, maybe there was an eyebrow raised when they said they were making the move up based on how it had gone for them in their previous times at the top level of Speedway. But Stuart Dixon and his boys there, as you mentioned there, they were a good league side, but they've finally got to the playoffs, having missed out, of course, cruelly in some respects last year, right at the death to Ipswich. So it was, they finally achieved that, and now obviously they go into the playoffs as now maybe the side that nobody wants.
I think they're favourites. I'd go as far as to say they're favourites. They don't have any problems, and they're all firing. And as I say, you see momentum at this time of year is absolutely vital. So, you know, they secured it last night. They are on a roll. They've clicked together. The lineup is very experienced in England. No question about it. And Stuart Dixon, that would have stung last year, just slipping up. That would have stung because they were going along quite nicely and then all of a sudden they were in free fall. And then the way it happened with releasing Chris Harrison and he's guesting for the team that then actually knocks you out. I mean, crikey, that would have been 1 or 2 sleepless nights, I suspect, over that one. But credit to them, they've come out, they signed a good team, they've got a new owner, and clearly an ambitious one. And Stuart has rounded the troops up and he's got them going. So they are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the next month or so. I'm sure of it.
So next for you then, obviously got the Wrocław Grand Prix coming up on the 31st, but Bank Holiday weekend coming up. And as I mentioned, it's a trip to Sheffield for you, Sheffield versus Bellevue on Monday night, which is the second leg of fixture earlier in the day. Classic Bellevue Bank Holiday double-header action. And sometimes that's actually tripped Bellevue up on occasion, those lunchtime fixtures at the National Speedway Stadium. But you'll be at Alderton for the second leg.
Yeah, you know, obviously it's quite cool of that because you've got that immediate result there, and you've got the continuity of, being able to reflect on that meeting which happened just a few hours earlier, which gives it a great storyline. Depending on the result, you can react upon that. That gives you a great storyline. Makes your work really easy in lots of respects because a lot of time when there's weeks and weeks and weeks between meetings, you can look at the score, but it doesn't tell a story, does it? To me, that doesn't paint really very many pictures. And the fact that there was 2 points between the sides last night, and it was obviously a close meeting, but you don't really remember too much about it because it was weeks ago. But the fact of the matter is that, it will be quite a good meeting. I think Sheffield are pretty tough at home. I think Bellevue didn't travel very well early season away from home. They were poor actually at times away from home. So if they're going to win the championship this year, they've got to figure that one out. But Brady Kurtz is back, he's flying. I think Jamin Lidsey's he's not too far away. Obviously, Dan Bewley, if he can maintain his form, certainly around Allerton and Bellevue, he's pretty special. So I'd like to think it'll be quite a tasty Monday night. Wrocław, on the other hand, I think is wonderful town, smashing stadium. The Olympic Stadium is just a pleasure to go and work in. It's normally a pretty good Grand Prix. It's a very good track. I'm expecting some fireworks there. You know, particularly as we pointed out, there's 5 riders within 2 or 3 points. And with Bartosz Zmarzlik, you know what I mean? If you're a Grand Prix rider and you're thinking about, you're looking over at Zmarzlik, and for the first time in about 5 years, you're seeing a little bit of a hiccup, mate, that's good. You're going to be licking your lips. You're going to be thinking, maybe this is the year where we've got half a chance. So I expect some big performances there. So looking forward to that. But it's the exciting time of the season, isn't it? Everything coming to a head, and where all the medals are handed out, what's not to like?
Indeed. Well, it's is it 3 in 3 weeks for you with the Grand Prix? Because you've got Riga on the 7th and then Voyens the week after that. So it's all going to come thick and fast, isn't it?
Yeah, and playoffs as well. You know, and we've got SGP2 as well thrown in for good measure. We've got 2 of those to come, one in Riga and one in Torrance. So that's 4 broadcasts a week. So, you know, semi-finals, Monday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. As I say, I've got plenty of strepsils in the bag. I've gone for the honey and lemon variety. I do prefer those. Other flavours are available. But,
this is real insight.
Oh, it is indeed. Yeah, it's what keeps me going. Particularly in that stadium on Saturday night where it was air conditioned, and I think I've never been quite as dehydrated in my life. But there's no doubt that there'll be plenty of shouting and screaming going on in the next few weeks.
Good stuff. You're going to be on the TV more than EastEnders in the next few weeks, that's for sure. There we are. Kelvin, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you back in action. Bank Holiday Monday and then a busy September.
Indeed. Look forward to it.
Awesome.